The box is already open. It sits on the kitchen table under a weak yellow light, wrapped in gold paper that has been torn down one side. The room is quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft tick of the wall clock. A woman reaches into the box slowly, brushing aside white tissue paper with the tips of her fingers. She lifts out a small carved figure, smooth, polished, cold in her hand. From the hallway, a child laughs once, then goes silent. She turns the object over. The face is finely shaped. Beautiful, really. Too beautiful. A thin cord is tied around it, dark red, frayed near the knot. Her thumb pauses there. She does not smile. She does not set it on the shelf. She just stands still, holding it a little farther from her body now, as if the room itself has shifted. Behind her, an older relative speaks from the doorway. "It belonged to your grandmother. Keep it. It will bring protection." The woman looks down at it again. The air feels heavier than it did a moment ago. Nothing has moved, nothing visible anyway. The lamp still glows. The curtains still hang still. But her hand tightens, then loosens. Because sometimes what enters your house does not arrive looking dangerous. Sometimes it comes wrapped like love, handed to you like honor, spoken over like a blessing. So what do you do when the thing placed in your hand feels wrong, even before you understand why? Most people think a gift is always a blessing. If someone gives you something with a smile, if it comes from family, if it carries history, value, or good intention, then it must be good. That's what we're taught. Receive it. Appreciate it. Don't question it. Don't overthink it. And in many cases, that's true. But that's not what actually happened in Scripture. There are moments in the Bible where people refused what looked like a gift, not because they were ungrateful, but because they understood something deeper. They recognized that not everything placed in their hands came from God, even if it looked harmless, even if it sounded kind, even if it came from someone close. Because sometimes a gift carries more than what you can see. Sometimes it carries influence. Sometimes it carries agreement. Sometimes it carries a direction your life was never meant to follow. And here's the part most people miss. You can accept something with your hands and not realize you've also allowed it into your spirit. So the question is not just, is this a gift? The real question is, what is this bringing with it that I cannot see? There's a pattern in Scripture that most people miss. It's quiet. It's not always explained directly. But once you see it, you start noticing it everywhere, from the Old Testament to the New. Moments where something is offered, and yet God's people don't receive it. Moments where acceptance would have looked polite, reasonable, even beneficial, but it would have led them away from God. Most people focus on what to receive, but the Bible spends just as much time showing us what to reject. And not randomly, not emotionally, but with discernment. Because not every open door is from God. Not every opportunity is aligned with His will, and not every gift is meant to stay in your life. When you begin to recognize this pattern, something changes. You stop reacting automatically. You start pausing. You begin to see beneath the surface. And today, I want to walk you through that pattern, step by step, so you can recognize what God is actually saying before you accept something that was never meant for you. To understand this clearly, we have to step into the world of the Bible, a world where objects were never just objects. In ancient Israel, the land was surrounded by nations that worshiped many gods. Idols were not rare decorations. They were part of daily life. Carved figures sat in homes. Amulets were worn on the body. Altars stood in open spaces. People believed these things carried power, protection, favor. So when God spoke to His people, He didn't only speak about behavior. He spoke about what they allowed into their environment. In Deuteronomy 7:25-26, the command was direct. Do not bring into your house anything devoted to false worship, not because the material itself had power, but because it represented allegiance. It pointed your heart somewhere else. And this wasn't limited to Israel. Centuries later, in the city of Ephesus, a place known for magic, trade, and spiritual practices, something happened when people encountered Christ. The book of Acts records that many who had practiced sorcery brought their scrolls together and burned them publicly. They didn't store them. They didn't keep them as memories. They removed them completely. Why? Because in that culture, just like in ours, what you keep close to you shapes what you become. And the early believers understood something we often overlook. Following God is not only about what you believe, it is also about what you allow to remain. There's a moment in Scripture that passes quickly, but if you slow down, it feels unusual. A victory has just happened. A king approaches another man with respect, with gratitude, with open hands. There's no threat in the air, no tension, just an offer. Take what you want. It sounds generous. It sounds deserved. But the man being offered this, Abram, does something unexpected. In Genesis 14, after rescuing Lot and defeating enemy kings, Abram is approached by the king of Sodom. And the king says in simple terms, keep the goods, just return the people. By every human standard, this is fair, even honorable. Abram fought the battle. Abram took the risk. Abram could justify receiving everything, but he doesn't. He lifts his hand, not to take, but almost as if making an oath, and says he will not accept even a thread or a sandal strap from the king. Not a little, not a symbolic portion. Nothing. He explains why. So that you will never be able to say, I made Abram rich. That's it. No long speech, no dramatic explanation. But something is clear. Abram saw beyond the surface of the offer. He understood that receiving from this king would tie his future to the wrong source. It would create a narrative that did not belong to God. So he refuses. And here's where the pattern begins to form. The offer wasn't evil on the surface. The gift wasn't cursed in appearance. But accepting it would have quietly shifted his identity. And Abram would not allow that. So the question starts to rise. What did he see that others would have missed? Now watch how this pattern appears again, but in a very different setting. No battlefield this time. No negotiation between kings. Just a man alone, hungry, tired, standing in a wilderness where nothing grows. The wind moves across dry ground, stones, silence, no crowds, no witnesses. And then an offer. In Matthew 4, after fasting for 40 days, Jesus is approached by the tempter. The first offer is simple, practical, almost logical. Turn these stones into bread, food for hunger, relief for the body. No one would question it. But Jesus does not move. Another offer comes, higher this time, broader. All the kingdoms of the world and their glory, I will give them to you. This is not small. This is influence, power, reach, everything people spend their lives chasing. But there is a condition. Bow down and worship me. And suddenly the pattern becomes clearer. Just like Abram, Jesus is being offered something that looks beneficial, something that could be justified, something that could even appear aligned with his mission. But the source is wrong. And Jesus responds immediately, no hesitation, no negotiation. He refuses, not because the offer had no value, but because accepting it would require a compromise that could not be undone. And now you start to see it. Different people, different situations, same principle. The danger is not always in what is offered. The danger is in what it quietly asks for in return. And if this has happened more than once, then the question becomes even stronger. How many times does this pattern appear without us noticing? Now the pattern sharpens, and the consequences become impossible to ignore. This time the setting is different again. Not a private conversation, not a quiet offer in the wilderness. This time it's inside a camp, among God's own people, after a command has already been given. In Joshua 7, the people of Israel had just experienced a powerful victory at Jericho. But God had made something very clear beforehand. Certain things were not to be taken. They were devoted, set apart, not to be touched, not to be kept. But one man saw something, a garment, beautiful, foreign, valuable, silver, gold. And he took it. Quietly, no announcement, no confrontation. He hid it beneath his tent, under the ground where no one could see. It didn't look like rebellion. It looked small, private, almost harmless. But the next battle came, and everything changed. Israel, who had just seen victory, suddenly faced defeat. Confusion spread. Fear moved through the camp. Nothing made sense, until it did. The hidden thing was not hidden. And what one man accepted in secret began to affect an entire nation. Now the pattern is no longer subtle. Abram refused and preserved his identity. Jesus refused and protected his mission. But Ashan accepted and brought destruction. Same structure. Something is offered. It looks valuable. It feels justifiable. But it carries a boundary God already set. And the moment that boundary is crossed, the cost multiplies. Not always immediately, not always visibly, but inevitably. So now the tension reaches its edge, because this isn't just about history anymore. It's about recognizing that the difference between alignment and consequence often begins with a single decision, to accept or to refuse. If we go a little deeper, the pattern becomes even clearer, not just in events, but in meaning. In Deuteronomy 7:26, when God warns his people not to bring certain objects into their homes, he uses a strong word, abomination. In the original Hebrew, this word is to'erba. It doesn't simply mean something unpleasant. It refers to something that is detestable because it violates covenant loyalty with God. So the issue was never just the object, it was what the object represented. Allegiance, agreement, direction. In the same way, when the New Testament speaks about peace guiding the heart, in Colossians 3:15, the word rule comes from a Greek term used in athletics. It means to act as an umpire, like a judge deciding what is in bounds and what is out. So now the pattern gains depth. God does not only give commands from the outside, he also places a kind of inner referee within the believer. Not fear, not confusion, but peace or the absence of it. And this connects everything we've seen. Abram didn't just refuse randomly, he discerned alignment. Jesus didn't just reject temptation, he recognized the cost beneath the offer. Ahan didn't just take an object, he crossed a boundary that had already been defined. So beneath every visible decision, there is an invisible layer, a question of covenant, a question of who this choice connects you to. And that is where discernment truly begins. Now everything comes together. Abram standing before a king, refusing what looked like reward. Jesus in the wilderness, rejecting what looked like provision and power. Ahan in the camp, taking what looked like opportunity. Different moments, different people, but the same pattern. Every time something is offered, every time it appears valuable, and every time it carries something deeper beneath it. Not just a benefit, a connection. That's the pattern. What you accept, you connect to. When Abram refused, he chose to remain connected to God as his source. When Jesus refused, he remained aligned with the Father's will, not the enemy's shortcut. When Achan accepted, he unknowingly connected himself and others to disobedience and its consequences. And this is the part most people miss. The danger is not always the object. The danger is the alignment it creates. Because not every gift is neutral. Some things carry influence. Some carry agreement. Some quietly shift your dependence from God to something else. And once that shift happens, it doesn't always feel dramatic. It feels small, gradual, almost invisible, until the effects begin to show. A loss of peace, a distortion of identity, a compromise that once felt unthinkable, now feels normal. So the pattern is simple, but serious. Before you accept anything, you have to ask not just, what is this? But where is this coming from? And what is it trying to connect me to? Because in the end, the question is not about the gift. It's about your allegiance. Maybe this feels closer than you expected. Maybe you're facing something right now. An offer, a relationship, an opportunity, even a gift that looks good on the surface. It makes sense. It feels reasonable. People around you might even encourage you to accept it. But deep inside, something is unsettled. Not loud, not dramatic, just not at peace. This is where the story becomes yours. Because discernment is not about rejecting everything. It's about recognizing what does not belong in your life, even when it looks right. You don't have to explain everything to everyone. You don't have to justify every no. Sometimes, like Abram, you simply refuse. Sometimes, like Jesus, you walk away without negotiation. And sometimes you remove what should have never been kept, not out of fear, but out of alignment. Because what you allow into your life will shape what grows inside of you. And not every gift is meant to stay. So, before you receive, pause and listen closely. Because peace is not just a feeling. It may be the quiet voice of God, guarding the door of your life.